United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like the minutes to reflect that we held an executive session prior to the meeting tonight for personnel issues. Are there any comments on agenda items? Any comments on agenda items? Okay. Item 4, approval of minutes for the last meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
The motion and a second. We have any discussion, comments, questions, changes? Roll call, please.
Bennett? Yes. Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Burt?
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes. Business and Finance, we have treasurer's reports, items 1 through 6.
Motion to approve 1 through 6.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner?
No.
Mr. Burt?
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett? Yes. Mrs. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes. Superintendent's report?
I'm seeking a motion to approve items 1 through 5 in the regular agenda and items 1 through 3, tabling item 4 on the supplemental agenda.
Heather, can we split number 5 because I am on that list for volunteers, so I have to abstain.
Oh, okay. All right, so items 1 through 4 on the regular. We'll do item 5 separately.
Okay.
Okay?
The motion for items 1 through 4?
Motion.
Motion to approve as the superintendent stated.
Second.
And we have a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Burt?
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett? Yes. Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes. Item 5 on superintendent's report. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Mr. Burt?
Abstain.
Mrs. Bennett? Yes. Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes. On the supplemental, items 1 through 3.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And we have a second. Any discussion?
Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Mrs. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes. And item 4 is tabled.
Right. So I have a few updates if you guys would like to kind of see our numbers and know where we're at in terms of what we're tracking in each of the buildings. And also, a couple of you had emailed and asked us to figure out, do kind of the same sort of analysis I had done before at the end of the first marking period in terms of could we bring everybody back 4 days a week and what would that look like? So just a few updates, it won't take long. So these are the Wyoming County cases as of today. Our positivity rate is now down over 10, or under 10, I'm sorry. Cases associated with long-term care, 131. Our incident rate per 100,000 is 153. But our level of community transmission, even though these numbers are trending a little bit lower, is still substantial. Now, here in our district, we're currently only tracking 1 case. Now remember, I do this on a rolling 14-day calendar because the high school was closed on Monday. All of the cases we were tracking at the high school because of Saturday, Sunday, and Monday all disappear, and we are tracking 0 cases in the high school now. 0 cases in 7th grade because, again, we were tracking 2, and we closed that building on Friday, and then had the weekend. The intermediate center, we're still tracking 1, and the primary center, we're currently tracking 0. So these are all really good numbers.
So Heather, when we close the building, they reset.
Yes, it has to be a 3 to 5 day closure, but I called Department of Health, and even though we had a couple athletic events there at the building. The larger building was not used. So I have it in writing from the Department of Health
Okay.
that we could have come back Tuesday, but we were virtual Tuesday.
Gotcha. So,
Yeah.
so it's 3 to 5 days
It's
and
3
then
to
they
5
reset.
days.
Okay.
But had we been able to come back on Tuesday, right,
We theoretically could have.
we theoretically could have.
Understood.
And I have that in writing.
Okay, thank you.
So, these are our current enrollments. So you can kind of see 80% of our primary kids are back in brick and mortar. That's our K-1-2. 74% of our intermediate is back in brick and mortar, 70% of 7th grade, and 73% of the high school. So I just want, these kids are coming on an AB schedule, but this is the number that are actually enrolled in brick and mortar, and they're coming to the building at least 2 days a week.
And do we know what that looks like for the third marking period? Because we're already.
That is the third
That's
marking.
the third, okay.
So our challenges, because some people have asked me, what are our challenges about returning to a 4-day work week at this juncture, at the end of the first semester? And they have to do with social distancing, space, and staffing. The Department of Health, this is their stance. All pre-K to 12 schools should implement strategies that limit the number of individuals in classrooms and other learning spaces and interactions between groups of students. All schools should have protocols for distancing student desks, seating, and other social distancing practices that allow for at least 6 feet of separation among students and staff throughout the day to the maximum extent possible. That's Department of Health. I went and I looked at the CDC, and what I could find was their continuum of risk. So right now, we're at a low risk for what the practices that we're doing. And we would say our high school is sort of at a medium risk because those kids are moving around. These are the upper 2 levels. The higher risk is when students and teachers engage entirely in in-person learning activities and events. There is some mixing of group and students throughout the school day, which we already do at the high school. Some sharing of objects between students and teachers, which we don't do. Some teachers, students, and staff follow some steps to protect themselves and others, such as the use of face masks, social distancing, and hand hygiene. So that is what the CDC says puts a school at a higher risk. We're currently not doing that in any of our buildings because we are socially distancing. The highest risk is when students are mixing freely between classes and activities, students and teachers are freely sharing objects. That would be like opening back up computer labs and things like that, which we wouldn't do. They don't even exist anymore. Teachers, students, and staff do not or are not following steps to protect themselves, such as the use of masks. But social distancing is included in that. So I went and I looked at, there's about 56 classes at the high school that have too many kids. And so when you split them between 2 cohorts, you can still socially distance. But if you were to bring everybody back every day, these are all the kids, or all the sections, okay, that we could not socially distance. So on any given day for period A, there are 14 classrooms that could not be socially distanced. So we would need an additional 14 classrooms and an additional 14 teachers in order to get through period A. That's if nobody's out sick, okay? And so you can see what period B looks like, and you can see our numbers there, and period C. So it's not just like a couple classrooms, it is a significant amount, and they are the core courses. I went through D. D is not quite as bad. E is not quite as bad. F is 13, it would be 13 sections, right? Yeah, the other kids are in lunch. Yes. And then G was 10, H was 10, and I was 4. And you can see that some of those, like psych and culinary arts, they're double periods. Okay? But it doesn't change the fact that those kids have to be somewhere and they have to be supervised. So a couple of you had asked me for these numbers. I can send you this, okay? But I wanted to make sure I provided it tonight. So that is the update I have. I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
At the first slide we had over 1,000 cases in the county.
Yes.
That's since March, correct?
Yes.
Does the county have any data on how many current cases we have, meaning people that are not recovered?
Not recovered, meaning deaths?
Well, for instance, we
Actively
have
sick?
people
Like actively sick now?
actively sick.
I don't know that. I don't know that. I do know that I remember that in October we had like 71 cases. So it's spiked that high. So since October, I can tell you that's,
I track daily additions, so I look at the State Department of Health website. You can look by zip code on the State Department of Health and by county. So when we started to spike in October, I started a spreadsheet to look at how the counties are trending, as well as the zip codes within Wyoming County are trending. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head exactly what you're asking, Phil, but I can send you the spreadsheet that I started so that you can start to see some of the trends. You know, within the county, I mean, we are continuing to see, I would say, about 8 new cases a day, roughly. You know, it was as low, you'll see days in the last couple of weeks where we've added 4, 3, but by and large, we're still in that 8 to 10 new cases per day in the county. So it's difficult to say when those individuals have fully recovered, but you can see the trend. And they also show probables. So we've been holding pretty steady with a relatively high number of probables in addition to the confirmed cases. So I can send that spreadsheet to the board if you want to see it. It is helpful because I've graphed it a couple of times to see where, you know, you can see there are periods of time where it looks like it's starting to flatten and then it has increased in terms of the slope. So, I mean, the rate of increase is starting to be elevated. And right now, I would say we are very slowly starting to see a tapering off in the county. Doesn't mean that we're not still seeing cases, but the rate is not as high as it was right after Thanksgiving, which is similar across the state.
So, yeah, so I track this daily, and also I use the 7-day average. And so if you go back, obviously at the end of October, we were basically zero as we think about it, because those numbers were super low, 70 total in the county. That went to probably 50 to 60 over a 7-day rolling period, up through going into Thanksgiving. Then we ran into this period at a county level where it was 75 to 95 on a rolling 7-day. It stayed that way until shortly after the new year, and we're back in the 45 to 65 range, depending on which one of those days you're looking at. But I just look at it as a 7-day. So we're not quite half of what we were on a 7-day period, but pretty close from that spike we had around Christmas time. So the numbers at a county level are headed in the right direction, which is, you know, basically where the country is seeing too. I mean, we're hearing about the plateaus here, and then hopefully we're going to start to run into warmer weather eventually, which sounds funny this week. But, you know, we're headed in the right direction from that perspective, as well as the vaccination started. So that's what, you know, as we think about next steps and plans, you know, that's one of the criteria we'll have to take a look at is what do the county numbers look like? Because, you know, from a social distancing perspective, if those numbers are closer to what we had back in September and October, we now know a lot more about how to handle those things than what we might have when we're getting 90 new cases over a 7-day time period.
Okay.
I was looking, it has been probably a week since I last looked myself, but at that time, and I have no reason to believe it's gotten any worse, Wyoming County out of 67 counties was like, depending on how you look at it, the top or the bottom 6 of, meaning that we're doing the best as far as the numbers on almost every parameter that people are monitoring regarding COVID. So in that sense, I think, you know, that's a positive thing. And also the ability to get tests done and to have access to tests is only getting better. So those rolling numbers, they reflect
More accurately.
but also like it's hard to compare them to what was going on in October where you couldn't get a test
right.
if
Yep.
you wanted to pay for it. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I know I was actually really impressed with those numbers for the classrooms because, you know, we've talked, without COVID, we don't want to put 30 kids in a classroom, or 35. And I wasn't sure what that would look like with the way we've had to do some things with our staffing for elementary and for online. So with the exception of like wind ensemble, I think, which
you know, we kind of expect they're gonna have a few more. Most of them were under 25. I feel we should start looking at, you know, in the event that we have everybody get their first, everybody who wants it, had access to get their first shot by, you know, mid to end February, that we should have a plan in place that I think 6 weeks, you know, there's a 1 week fluctuation, I think, depending on which shot you get. But we should start looking at a plan that, you know, considers an acceptable level of risk, given all the other things that we know, all the things that have come out in science and, you know, the medical community as far as this age group and the risk and those access to the vaccine. And we should start looking at what that plan looks like to bring kids back. Because even if it's only 6 weeks at the end of the school year, or 8 weeks, or however that might work out, I still feel it's worth it. You know, I'm not okay saying we're just we are making improvements. You know, there were changes this week, and the pendulum is shifting a little bit more. And I will say that a lot of the high school teachers had made changes as far as offering live accessibility, and that's just building. It's going to get better as we move along, because that is outside of the comfort zone for a lot of people. But I will also say that my kids were threatened with their life, that if they didn't show up to these things, there would be consequences. And there were situations where my kid was literally the only one that showed up. So everybody's home life is different. There are kids who are working right now because they have the opportunity to do so and doing their schoolwork at night. There are kids that don't have access to the internet. There are kids that aren't going to do it unless there's a parent or somebody there saying, you need to do this now. But overwhelmingly, we need to be telling the kids that this is, you know, we're not saying this is perfect. We're not saying this is all we're going to do. We're not, you know, don't take it as any of that. But if we're asking our teachers to make this available and no kids are participating or taking advantage of that, then is that the best use of our teachers' time? I think that it is, and I think that we as families and as parents need to make the expectation, not say if the school's not going to require, we aren't. It doesn't matter if the school requires it. It's an opportunity that's being afforded to the kids, and they need to take it unless there's some barrier that they can't. But all that said, I still think that having a plan and working towards a plan to bring all the kids back at the soonest realistic opportunity possible is my preference.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I agree with Holly. I think fourth marking period, it needs to be our goal for all kids to be back in school.
And I will say that our administration is busting their butt, along with board members, to get access to the vaccine for all of our teachers that want it. And our teachers are also working with their own doctors independently to try and get that vaccine. That is a factor. And while it was good for the community that the categories got opened up a little bit more, it's not great for our efforts to get our teachers access to the vaccine. So that is something that is a little bit outside of our control, but it's not for the lack of effort, for sure. And if somebody has a resource on how we can get better access to vaccines for our teachers,
That'd be great.
Heather's given out her extension about 300 times, and we'll be happy to have, if you work at Rite Aid, if you work at Walgreens, you work at Dollar General, and they happen to have vaccines coming in,
Vice Markets?
give us a call.
So I agree with, you know, working toward the direction of getting back in person. We know we've all been there. So the key will be is we have some small group discussions going on about what would enable that to happen, what that would look like. Continuity of education is important. And so I would love for my kids to be back in school. Jen and I emailed about that, and I know where, you know, that group is. And so there is a balance here, because for the folks that do want to come back, there's also a good group of people who won't come back to school if there's not proper social distancing in place. And so leaving behind the debate of whether that's the right thing to do or not, that's a reality, because we had kids that left the hybrid to go to full online when the county numbers were high. And so we do need to be sensitive of balancing all the stakeholders here. So when I say that, meaning the kids who want to be back, the kids who want to make sure that there's proper distancing, our staff members who have underlying health conditions and things like that. So I think we can do it. And so me saying this isn't that I don't feel like we can head down this path. It's just that it's not as easy as us wanting to do it. And we're all tired of COVID. I sure as heck am. I know everybody else is as well. What we've done so far has worked pretty well. There's been a lot of issues, no doubt. There's been some heroic efforts by administration, teachers, and family members, and everybody trying to get their kids the best education that they can. And so some districts are a little bit luckier. So Heather shared some data in terms of where Lake Lehman was, and their classroom sizes are significantly bigger than ours. And so they've been able to put everybody back in school and still
Square
maintain
footage, just
square
to
footage.
clarify, yeah.
Square
Yeah,
footage of
sorry,
the
thank you.
classroom,
So they've been able to do some of those things. And so we want to go down this path to look at what would need to happen to be able to enable that. And it's not too late, meaning like what Holly said, ideally, if we could get back in the fourth marking period or earlier, that's great. But we want to set the model because we're not going into next year with a hybrid schedule. We want to be going into the fall with everybody full online. I'm hopeful that we're going to be there at some point this year as well.
Yeah, and I do think it's worth mentioning that I have not talked to any administrator who feels as though hybrid is the goal ever. We might have differing opinions as to an acceptable level of risk, but there's no one who said this is really spectacular and we should just do this all the time with or without COVID going forward. That isn't the case. I think it's important to note that those numbers, I don't remember the original numbers from the last time, but it looks to me like we have a lot more kids that are in person or in hybrid now than we did at the beginning of the school year. And I'm sure there's been some seesawing between the kids that were in school and then they went cyber versus kids who were in cyber and it didn't work for their families, they came back. But comparably, sorry.
No, the trend was K to 6, a lot of kids came back.
Yeah.
7 to 12, a lot of kids went out.
Comparatively, though, we still have more of our high school than what surrounding districts are experiencing.
Yeah.
So,
And so, like, that's one of the things that makes it difficult. To compare us to another district that is supposedly full in, you have to consider that 73% of our kids are in. Like, they may only be in 2 days a week. So when I call up to Trail, and I'm like, how many of your kids actually came back, your high school kids actually came back to school? It's only 50%. So in reality, they're able to do 50% every day. We can't because 73% of our kids came back. And so we can't, it's a different, they have different resources, they have different needs, and they're meeting them in different ways. So then I called Lake Lehman, and I said, Jim, how is it that you're able to socially distance? And he said, our classrooms are 1,100 square feet. And he said the ones at the primary, or the lower grade levels are even bigger. So they also had 73% come back. But their facility is different than ours.
And our
so
classrooms
I'm not
are-
saying it's impossible. I just said it's not, like, just because one district has done it, there are underlying reasons why they were able to do it, or, you know, it's not as simple as it was their will. Because if all of us could just have our will, I wouldn't be wearing this, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
And
We'd be talking about learning.
yeah, and I think there was an assumption, at least on my part, that the schools that had gone back full had just said, we don't care, not we don't care about social distancing, but we have a different acceptable level of risk than what you have at this time. And while that may be the case in some situations, and it variable by variable, overall, they just had different resources in many cases. So, but all that said, the gold standard is that our kids come back to school. So that discussion, I think, knowing that we wouldn't do that until certain parameters are met, that discussion needs to start now, because that's not going to be a small thing either. It's not as though if we all voted right here tonight that we're going back full time next week, that it could just happen like that. So, you know, I'm not saying we need to do it immediately. I'm just saying, let's talk about it now so that we have a plan in place so that, you know, we get access to something, we have a plan. Okay, we now know that going out 6 weeks from here, we could probably do something like this. We could start collecting the data from who's coming back. What do these classroom sizes look like? What do we have to accommodate? What do we have to change? Because we are gonna lose some kids that won't come back. I know it's gonna be complicated, but I think it's gonna be worth it.
The other thing real quick, and this is somewhat on the topic, I want to make sure we're thanking the administration for working on the cyber program, and so that's going to be a strategic advantage that we have going into next year. So for the amount of people we have that are out, we're going to have a ton of kids who will choose not to come back, whether it's the remnants of the virus, whether it's the additional flexible schedule that they like. And so from a strategic perspective, what we're doing now sets that standard for next year. So I appreciate the administration, the teachers who created the content, who are doing the content, especially on that C3 platform, because from a financial perspective, if that's not successful, we would be in deep trouble. You know, I keep hearing about, I read these articles across Pennsylvania about how much money has been moved to private cyber charter. And we've had some, but not nearly to the levels that I'm reading in other school districts. The entire CARES budget for Pennsylvania was thrown away essentially to private cyber charter across the state. And so that for us is going to be a big advantage, and we need to make sure that stays in front of our teams and our teachers to make that program even better, because we're going to need it for years to come.
Heather, am I understanding correctly that now, like the biggest lift on the cyber issue this year was literally building all these courses from scratch using our curriculum?
Yes.
Once that's built out now, this isn't going to, I mean, it's going to need tweaked, it's going to need attention ongoing, but, you know, the building the house will be done. It's just going to be the maintenance on the house.
In fact, some of the high school teachers have built, because they teach a semesterized course, so they built it the first semester. And I had one of the high school teachers said, now I get to go back and I just get to make it better. So yeah, that's not the case for all of them, but for the ones that have built like a semesterized course, so they're still working really hard. And this has not been easy. And you know, when we finish this year, we will have a product that is going to save this district money for years to come. So we just have to keep, it's not perfect. It is not perfect by any means. But, you know, our teachers continue to work hard on it and the administrators do. So.
Thank you. Looking on the committee reports, I believe, Shane, you
I would
believe we
like
need a
to schedule a building and grounds committee.
Building and Grounds Committee?
So my recommendation would be to look out to the next scheduled board meeting, which I believe is February 11th. And we would plan to meet prior to the executive committee. So I think what was recommended was 6 a.m. 6 a.m.
No.
I will not be here at 6 a.m. 6 p.m. And we could meet in the library here, since that's where we would typically meet. Okay.
That's fine.
So 6 p.m. on the 11th of February in the library.
Or earlier?
Clue.
Okay, and that's Mr. Widener, Mr. Burke, and Shannon Gregory.
I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good for 6 p.m.
6 p.m. Okay. All right, moving on. New business. The Visa account is there for your information. Item 2, you have monthly summaries of Kelly Services substitute teacher fill rate for your review. And we have a resolution looking for to approve bus and van contracts.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Mr. Widener?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Bennett?
Abstain.
Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Mr. Farmer?
Yes. Okay, that's the last of the agenda items. Are there any public comments?
Yeah, I just had a question
Baker.
about the vaccine. What's the roadblock here in Wyoming County? I had a talk with Public yesterday, and they had full vaccination and stuff. Why, what's going on?
I can't answer that.
you I make multiple phone calls every single day. And I am in touch with the hospital, and I'm in touch with Jean. And through the IU, we actually had access to 30 vaccines. So I started with our oldest employees and offered them those slots. So we had about 27 that actually went and got it. That was like a 24-hour turnaround. That was like, we were scrambling. So a very few, a fraction of our staff has had it. But then that went dry. And honestly, when I call these places and they don't call me back, it's like crickets. It's just like they're not even going to call. I've been calling places in Susquehanna County, that I know have done it for other schools, and I don't get any return phone calls. I've called in Lackawanna County as well.
But you don't know if it's designated by county as the issue or anything
I
like
do
that?
not know.
Heather, do you,
Speak for
what was the number of our, it was a high number of our staff, right? Like percentage or total staff that was interested or wanted to have the vaccine?
Yes.
Are they, if they're able to get the vaccine through their doctor, are
Yes.
they notifying the district so
Yes.
that they can come off that list?
Yeah, and I'm getting a number of people who have like a pre-existing condition that they are getting it, and or they were able to schedule through Geisinger or whatever. So yes, they're emailing me and saying, take me off the list, I got it. And so I'm keeping track of that as well.
Because, I mean, the ultimate thing is, when we're talking about timelines and looking out going forward, if there's a point in time that comes that, the district itself doesn't have a connection to say, hey,
Right.
we're getting all these shots, however, it becomes common knowledge that anybody can go to their doctor or make an appointment with Geisinger, then that needs to play a part in this plan as well.
I continue to encourage staff. I've sent out several emails that said, look, I don't know when I'm going to be able to set this up or if I'm ever going to be able to set this up. So if you can get an appointment someplace, do it. Take whatever comes the quicker of the two. So I have reiterated that to staff at least twice, that you go and you get it if you can. And I think people are, because they're emailing me.
Right.
Good.
But I mean, the bottom line is teachers are in group 1B and not 1A, and that's where
Correct.
the state is vaccinating right now.
Unless they
you
have
have
a
the-
pre-existing condition.
Right.
Right.
Meet one of the other criteria.
Right.
Anybody else?
Phil,
Yes,
I
Bob.
got a couple things I like to say. Just before the last board meeting, one of our teachers, back when I was in school, Russell Fox, passed away. And thoughts go out to the Fox and the Siegel families. He was a shop teacher back when I was going through, when we had grades 7 through 12.
Yep. Remember
And the other morning, Channel 16 had a thing on. Jane Hellman passed away about 2-3 years ago, and they had a thing on in like a memorial with a library over at Marywood College for books for kids, that they could go to Marywood there, and they had like book stations in her honor.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else? Didn't know what? We have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everyone.